Hi, friends. Welcome to the Do Life podcast, where we talk about life, its challenges, and some clever ways to tackle some common obstacles with cutting edge science, technology, and a splash of metaphysical properties. I'm your host, Life Coach Layla, and today I have a special guest, Kim Skief. She is an emotional alchemist and host of the podcast, You Are the Medicine. Kim, it's such an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. Okay.
Yeah, it's been a long journey. We've known each other um through professional means for probably a couple years now since we
Yeah.
launched a book together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was trying to remember how long has it been?
Yeah,
Um,
it's at least a couple summers ago, I think, at this point. Yeah.
yeah, time flies.
Right.
Yeah.
You are an adventurer like I am. You're all over the place. You're just in Sedona. That's such a magical place. It's one of my favorite places to visit. It's just, you feel just so enlightened just by being there.
I haven't actually gotten to go to Sedona. I've been all over Arizona, but I have not been there yet. That's definitely on the list.
Well, yeah, I saw you in Arizona, and I thought for sure you would have been in Sedona because
Yeah.
that place is
Yep.
just right up your alley. You have to go.
Yeah, it's there's a discussion of a retreat happening there. I haven't finalized anything with that yet, but yeah, I definitely would love to go to Sedona.
Yeah, for sure. So tell me a little bit about your journey. What got us here? Like how
Mhm. Well,
yeah.
you mentioned the book, so I'll kind of dive in with that because it's a good starting point. So, in my chapter of the book, which is called "Give Yourself Grace," I speak about how in 2015, so 10 years ago, my daughter, my 11-year-old daughter Grace, was diagnosed with brain cancer, and she passed 3 months later, and it was quite the interesting. Interesting's not the word I want. It was brutal. Let's just put it like it was. It was
Mm,
brutal. And as a result of that and many other things that were happening in my life, but that being the biggest catalyst, after she passed, I began to question everything, everything, and ended up over a couple of year period, really more than that, but the first 2 years were big, deconstructing a lot of beliefs. And then I hung out there as far as spiritual aspects. I was in this place of I don't know exactly what I believe, but I know what I don't believe. And I stayed there for probably a couple more years. Then I was in so the tail end of 2019, right before the pandemic started. Um being careful with the words here. I know some of those words can flag things. So I, right before the pandemic, was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. And at that point, decided, you know what? Maybe I need to have a better understanding of what I actually believe because I really feel like I need some kind of anchor right now. So I really started diving into a lot of different spiritual books and getting a better understanding of what felt true to me. And prior to was it prior to I don't recall the exact time frame, but somewhere along the way, I recognized that the voice in my head that kept beating the shit out of me, telling me I was a bad mom, I should have tried harder, I should have done more, I should have been more perfect, I would never be happy again, I shouldn't be happy again. Just all of these kind of really terrible, negative self talk kind of thoughts that I could speak back to that thought. And I did. I started doing that and being like, no, we're not going there. I'm not doing that. I'm over it. So then when the cancer journey happened, I was open to exploring some things that I hadn't prior considered. I was very much in a Christian mindset before my daughter passed and was kind of had this dogmatic thing going on. And I was somehow my higher self provided me with the resource of this book that was talking about how you can um, use your own thoughts to help manage your health and with very little understanding but thinking, okay, well, the book says it works. I might as well try it, right? I started diving into that. And I also ended up getting a whole lot of help from my higher self in regards to what I would now call intuition. I didn't use those terms back then to help me through that journey. And that was where you and I met again with the workshop series I did on the 9 things I helped to heal myself from cancer. Um, and that was all very much, a lot of it was surrender. I'll touch on 5 things as I go along, but a lot of it was surrender, and surrendering doesn't mean giving up, but surrendering to accepting what is, and then what's the best choice I can make in this situation, even if my ego is screaming, "Don't do that. It's too scary. It's a bad idea." And even those things that prior to that I wouldn't have even considered trying, like chemotherapy was one of the things. Like, I was very much into holistic health, and
Mm.
this is not an advertisement for chemo by any means, but overcoming fear is what was happening there for me, and I was terrified of that idea. And just some other things that were, like deciding I was gonna start eating foods that I would have rather not eaten, period. So a lot of surrender happening. And I eventually, after getting through that journey, came to a better understanding of this is where I'm at right now. So there's more evolution that was happening, but still not really into any kind of metaphysical stuff. Decided life is short, and I'm done sitting on the sidelines waiting for it to get better and feeling sorry for myself that it's not. So I'm going to go after a master's in nutrition. And I started into that, and I recognized that a lot of what I was learning and being expected to understand was very much of the mindset that healing is outside of you. Anecdotal evidence of, people having healed themselves was very much dismissed. So after 2 semesters of that, I decided this is not for me. I don't want to end up spending a whole lot of money and energy and time on something that's going to result in me being extremely frustrated when I finally get into that career. So I thought, okay, well, what do I want then? And coaching was something I had heard of before, but it wasn't, I had resisted it because I thought, oh, you can't make money at that. It's too new. Most people are going to think it's weird. I had all these excuses. And it came back up again, and I was like, I'm going to do it. Well, as a result of deciding to join this quantum health coaching program online, I was exposed to things that I hadn't heard of in my wildest dreams. A lot more metaphysical stuff, and I was open to it, but I was still very skeptical. So then along the way, and I'll end up circling back to some of the cancer stuff, but along the way, um, I started being exposed to more and more metaphysical stuff and trying some of it, like manifestation, for example. Still, it was very much of a foreign concept that I was kind of just testing out, like not really sure if I believed it, but like, okay, well, other people are saying it works, and I'm gonna give it a try. And then I started seeing things happening, and I was like, oh, this is legit. Like, I don't understand how this is legit, but okay, it's legit. Trying to decide where I want to go from here. I ended up deciding after that the universe is a lot more is energy more than it is physical. And there's a whole lot of people that are talking about that these days. Dr. Dispenza, Dr. Braden, some others that are not coming to mind right now. And I had this aha moment where I was like, okay, I get it. So the only difference between myself and source is a belief that there's a difference, and letting go of the idea of separation over and over and over. And it's an ongoing moment by moment thing. I had very much taken an interest in the idea of awakening. And I thought that awakening meant that you have this huge event happen and the gates of heaven open and everything is glorious and you just waltz through the rest of life. And I was like,
Yeah, how wrong is that? Like the
okay.
opposite when you have an awakening.
So now I've come to understand, even just in the last several months, it's more of a constant unlayering, letting go, and a constant evolving. And even more recently, have become aware that the emotions, there's a lot of people in the spiritual world, if you want to call it that, the community, who think that, who believe that it's the experience. In order to have a high vibe experience, you're supposed to be love and light all the time.
Mhm.
And obviously, unconditional acceptance or love, which, everybody has their own definition of that they attach to that. And in my working definition for that is just pure acceptance of what's happening, not this necessary ooey gooey, oh, you're so sweet and I love you to death kind of feeling. That as the backbone for awakening, more than like you have to walk around pretending to be something that you're not.
Yeah, I focus on the dark feminine, which embraces the shadow versions of ourselves and all the parts of it's the opposite of the love and light. It's the darkness, it's the shadows, it's the part of us that we don't want to acknowledge for the most part, because in order to have that balance, in order to be the divine feminine, you have to have a balance between the light and the darkness. So to just live in love and light is not it's not helpful for your soul's growth. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's when you reclaim those parts of yourself, the shadow parts that you're talking about, it gives you a whole lot more creative energy to work with because that energy's been reintegrated into your soul. And now you can come from this place of like, yeah, well, I'll share a recent experience. My son and I decided a couple months ago that, as kind of a end of the year big bang celebration, we would go snow skiing, which is not something either one of us had ever done. He's 25, I just turned 54, and he suggested this to me, and I was like, You want me to do that?" Like, okay. So we get there, and I'm manifesting stuff left and right and have very much come to the understanding that we're always manifesting. It's just, are we doing it consciously? And I've gotten much better at being able to do so consciously. And a big part of that being by embracing those shadow parts of myself, allowing that emotion to be present without allowing it to be in control. I asked him one night during the ski trip, what do you want me to manifest for tomorrow? And he said, you going down the big hill. The first day, so we went skiing for 2 days. The first day was basically we got the basic lessons, here's how you stop, here's how you turn, that kind of thing. And then the second and then we spent lots of time just practicing basic skills that day on a little bitty hill. And then the second day was, him saying, I want you to go down the big hill of the easy ones. And I said, okay. And so I got to the ski slope and I kept telling myself the only difference between myself and somebody who's been doing this for a long time, the biggest difference, I should say, is confidence. So, can I be confident? Can I sit with whatever feelings come up and not allow them to be in charge? So, I practice breaking. I'm like, the main thing I gotta know is how to stop, right? That's all that really matters. I'm not trying to be the next Guinness World Record holder or anything. So we get up to the top, or I get up to the top of the big hill, and I get up there and I'm standing there next to another lady who had been practicing on her snowboard all day. And I said, you ready to go? And she's like, no. And I said, oh, come on. You've been practicing all day. You're just getting in your head. You'll be fine. And she's like, I know. I said, so do you want to go ahead? And she's like, no. I said, okay. And I'm thinking to myself, I could very easily put myself in her shoes right now and stand right here next to her for the rest of the day. And I'm like, nope. Okay, I feel you, fear. I see you. It's all good. It's all good. Down I went. And it went fine. I mean, I didn't crash in anything. I didn't break any bones. I got down to the bottom. I was fine. I had like, I'm just gonna flow with it. Yeah, it was very much of I did it, yay, moment. And just continuing to embrace that, and it ties in with talking about surrender, like I mentioned earlier, and very much recognizing there's a whole lot of trust involved.
Surrender is my definition of surrender is letting go of control.
Yes, Yes. So even today, as we were preparing for this meeting, and I was having technical difficulties, and you were having technical difficulties, and I had sent you a couple messages trying to reach out, like, what's going on? And I'm like, let it go, Kim. And you texted me back to let me know what was happening. And I look at my phone and it says 111. This was the time. And I'm like, okay. And
Which
then
is
we
funny because
continue.
it's 11:11 in my time zone.
Wow, okay. And uh then we continued, and then I was having some trouble, and I sent you a message and let you know what was going on. I looked down at my phone. 1, 2, 3. Okay, just trust. And yeah, very much about letting go of control and recognizing that you will be provided for. And that doesn't mean that there won't be challenges. We're very much about evolving and allowing ourselves to do so by still feeling the feelings, but at the same time letting go of this smaller version of yourself, right? Being aware of the thoughts, like I mentioned earlier about my thoughts that were just hammering me. And, that's just one example. I could give others, but being okay with recognizing I'm not that set of thoughts. I'm the one noticing those thoughts. And I get to say, hey, one of the titles that I considered as far as what to call myself is the mind architect, because I very much have recognized, and that and it ties in with emotional alchemy a whole lot, because I have very much recognized that your thoughts very much contribute to your feelings. They You can either feed the feelings or just silently observe, ride the wave, and let it float. Which, if you don't feed the feelings, they last less than a minute. And most people are like, no way. Like, scientifically, they've proven that.
Yeah,
And
the
the interesting
chemicals from the emotion only last in your body for like a minute or so.
Yeah, exactly. But what's interesting is coming back around to the idea of the embracing the shadows that you mentioned. When we allow ourselves to feel those things and let them go instead of feeding them, we're actually lifting our vibration. And no, we're remembering our vibration. Because when we stuff those things, two things happen, and kind of getting into the science of manifestation. So we have a thought, it creates a feeling. Thoughts are electric, feelings are electromagnetic. So the energy around us is attracted to those feelings. Well, if you've got a constant state of something that's unresolved in there, some kind of wounding that you're not allowing to be expressed. And that doesn't mean go bite somebody's head off. It means feel the feelings, let them go, surrender, right? Then if you've got this constant underground thing happening and you're not allowing it to be expressed, then you're going to continue to magnetically attract those situations that will allow that feeling to express itself. And it's not a punishment, it's an opportunity for evolving. And you can continue to refuse to feel it and keep pushing it down, pushing it down, pushing it down. But the opportunities are going to keep coming because it's your
And one
body's way
thing
of
I
saying,
I learned about this is um when you go to feel the feeling, feeling it isn't just replaying the moment in your head. It isn't just telling the same story, because when you do that, all you're doing is reactivating the chemical emotions that come with it. So
yeah,
in order to feel it, you hear the phrase like name it to tame it. You can say, okay, this thing happened. I feel this because of it, and then sit with those feelings. Like, can I allow these feelings to process? Can I move forward from this? And it's
right.
usually the coulda, woulda, shouldas, the griefs, the regrets, all of those really low vibrational emotions that pop up. And we want to avoid them. We want to just ignore them, sweep them under the rug. But like you said, we have to
They're
process them.
bad.
You have
Yeah.
to feel it to heal it. I hate that phrase, but it's so true.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I want to touch on, you just said it's a lot of those, well, the phrase that came to mind as you were describing these different feelings was resentments, not just anger, but like a repeated, this was wrong, it shouldn't have happened, and playing it over and over. And that's another one of those areas, both in my experience with my daughter and with the cancer diagnosis, and then multiple things since then, where I've recognized, as I choose to let go of those things and not hold other people responsible, which isn't really, you're not really ever holding another person responsible when you're holding unforgiveness. What you're doing is keeping yourself captive and continuing that cycle of chemicals like you just mentioned in your body. The biochemistry just keeps playing over and over and over, and you're drinking the poison and expecting somebody else to feel bad. And so as you release those resentments, immediately you are remembering your true self. And then those things can be expressed as well. And that's another big part of actually something that I did, a couple of examples that I did when I was in my cancer journey. There were a lot of things that hadn't been shared with one of my children, that I had stuffed it. And eventually had a hard conversation, and it went surprisingly well, but it also gave me a whole lot of relief. And then there was another example, without getting into the details. Prior to my leaving Christianity, somebody had written me a letter that was very accusatory and critical. And I kept the letter for a long time, decided, and I hadn't actually read it. My ex-husband read it, and that was enough to know that I didn't want to read it. And I had kept the letter for a long time. And when I decided one day during my, cancer journey, I'm going to light that thing on fire. I'm never going to read that, and I'm just let it go. Just it's over. Whatever she said, she said. It doesn't matter now. It's over. And the weight that lifted was huge. And the same thing, but on a much grander scale, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I had made peace as much as I knew how to make peace with the passing of my daughter. And I had this understanding that, and this, before I say this, I'm not asking anybody to shift their beliefs. What I'm telling you is how much the power of my mind played a part in this. So I came to this understanding that we have soul contracts, and that my daughter knew what she was getting into, and she chose it, and she knew how it would benefit myself and others. And when I shifted that story to, instead of this long-standing it shouldn't have happened kind of thought pattern, it was, my gosh, it was for my higher good, because now I understand who I am. And the amount of energy that shifted in that moment was enormous. The best way I can describe it is probably like a Kundalini moment, where I was just running through the house, jumping up and down, singing, dancing, screaming, crying, all the things, and just elated, like, oh my
And
God, how
almost
much
it
love
seems
can
like
I
it
give
changed
right
who
now?
you are as a person.
Yes, it absolutely did. And it has continued to do so. And now I look at it and go, okay, whether that story is true or not true, I get to decide. Coming back again to the idea that you get to pick your thoughts, and you can pick any set of thoughts you want. If they're not serving you, don't keep picking them.
I love Marissa Peer. I quote her all the time. She says, "Tell yourself a better lie." Like
Yeah.
90% of our thoughts are recycled thoughts. So we just think the same thing over and over. And we think worst case scenario. Like you said, you had all this pent up energy and you had this conversation with your child and it went surprisingly well. That means that every time you thought about having this conversation, you thought about worst case scenario, how they were going to react, and they were going to react poorly. And you think all the negative things. Why? Do the opposite. Tell yourself a better lie. Tell yourself you're going to have this conversation and it's going to end up amazing and she's going to have the most wonderful response, or he or she or whatever. But if you're going to lie to yourself anyway, none of these thoughts that we have are proven known facts majority of the time. They're just made up scenarios in our head. So make up a scenario where the best case scenario happens.
Yes. So I want to say two things in relation to that. One, those thoughts that keep repeating, like you said, 90% of our thoughts, yes. And that's factual. They've shown that. And we have upwards of 80,000 thoughts a day that we're not aware of. But it's, subconsciously these programs that are running that help us remember how to tie our shoes so we don't have to learn that every day. Things that we just do secondhand. But a lot of those thoughts that are creating a version of you that you don't necessarily enjoy anymore are coming from those resentments, because they're bubbling up from these feelings that haven't been felt. And a really good analogy I heard recently on this was, it's like taking, if you have a feeling that you're refusing, And that doesn't mean like, okay, yeah, you cried, but not like what you said, detaching yourself from it, like name it and feel it instead of like, poor me, blah, 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 whatever story you come up with. I said, okay, so the analogy was it's like taking a basketball and trying to shove it under the water. And the more you try to shove it down, the more effort it takes to keep it down until eventually you're not going to be able to keep it down and it's going to come out like a damn volcano. And I'm like, whoo, I feel that. I have definitely experienced that. And recognizing, like, coming back to, what we manifest and what we attract is very much tied to these things that we're shoving, 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 shoving down. That in itself is proper motivation for maybe I should just go ahead and feel it because I don't want to keep having that experience. And then the other thing I wanted to share was you said, tell yourself a better lie. Very cool story. And it requires some backstory. And I mentioned before we started the recording that I would share how a previous video of yours helped me. So this all ties in. Back in October, I think it was, I watched that video and it was talking about your money story and telling yourself, story things about abundance. And that along with a whole lot of other examples that I could give right now about the possibilities of abundance, that we make abundance feel a lot harder than it is. And listening to people tell all these stories of how they just adopted this mindset of like, the provision will be there. And so I had been preparing for some time to travel out west, pick up a camper that my nephew gave me, and spend some time traveling with a significant other. But I kept dragging my feet on it because I'm like, money, 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 money. And I finally had this aha moment where I was like, oh my gosh, I've spent all this time over the last year recognizing what it means to be a sovereign being and really studying and focusing on that in many areas of my life. Okay, I'm going to be sovereign in this regard, in this regard. And then finally realizing, the final front, the main area where we have true sovereignty that no one can take away is our emotional liberation. Because people can take your stuff, they can, call you names, they can do whatever, but they can't decide how you're going to feel. You get to decide that if you take charge of that situation, which means, again, allowing those other feelings to bubble up so that when things happen, you don't get triggered, you respond instead of react. So I was preparing for this trip and decided, okay, this is the one area where I have not felt sovereign is around money. Like I keep worrying about it and not allowing myself to move forward. And I decided no more. I'm doing it. So I made plans with my significant other and I got there. And there's a lot of backstory that I won't dive too deeply into, but when I arrived to meet up with him, I recognized he was not himself. Long story short, decided that he needed to be taken to a hospital for emotional reasons. And now I find myself in the agreement between us was here was a guy who he's very handy. He's driven lots of large vehicles. He knows lots of that kind of mechanical and construction related things. And myself not being that, I was like, okay, I'm leaning on you. I want to learn these things, but I definitely need a teacher. And he's like, cool, it's a deal. So I get there and he ends up in the hospital and I am now faced with a camper that I know nothing about driving, that has some repairs needed that I am not equipped skill wise to do. And I'm like, holy crap, what do I do? Oh my God, and I was really freaking out. I was very stressed. And then I recognized, okay, is this what I want to keep being? Because I'm choosing to stay in this state. And no, it isn't. So what's the next step? And I ended up in an RV park. I'm leaving out a lot for the sake of time, but I ended up in an RV park and all the help that I needed for right then was available and free. And then I decided, okay, we're going to take this show on the road. I'm actually going to, staying parked in an RV park is one thing, but actually going out and doing it is another. So again, next step, what do I need to do? And I ended up deciding to head back to Illinois. This was from Arizona, driving this trailer on my own. I had mapped out these different places that I was gonna stop along the way for, overnight camping. And one of the places that I decided I really wanted to go that had been on my bucket list, if you will, was a place in Austin, Texas called the Hamilton Pool Preserve. And I get all the way to the very last road that I'm going to need to be on in order to get to this place and realize there's all these signs saying no trucks with trailers. And I'm like, shit, what am I going to do? Like, I'm already on the road and I'm not yet skilled at turning this thing around, especially in a tight situation. And I was like, okay, I'm going to trust. And that's what the theme of this whole story I'm telling. I just kept saying, I'm going to trust. It's how's the universe going to work this out? How's the universe going to work this out? So I see this place where I can pull off and it's big enough that if I need to, I can get myself turned around. And I stop and I'm looking on my phone. I'm going to call this place and ask them some questions like, what the heck? Why am I not supposed to be on this road? And my internet stops working. And I was like, and so I stop and I'm thinking, okay, screw it. Maybe I just need to turn around and go back home. And like not home, but go back to the trip that I was making my way back to Illinois. And then I stopped myself and I went, after all that I've seen happen, and I'm leaving out a lot of cool stories. After all that I've seen happen in the last few weeks, how can I stop trusting that infinite possibilities are available to me? Miracles happen. And as soon as I had that thought, a woman drives into the same little, it was just like a pull off area on the side of the road. Turns out part of somebody's driveway. And I'm like, well, that's not a coincidence. And I go and talk to her and I'm telling her what's going on. And she's like, well, I'm actually coming from an RV park that's just up the road. And the reason why you don't want to go further down with the trailer is because there's this really bad hairpin turn that people have lost axles and so forth on. I'm like, yeah, I don't need to do that. She goes, but this RV park's just up the road and you can use our internet and figure out what you want to do. But she says that Hamilton pool it requires reservations and they book out. And she says that and I'm like, miracles, I'm saying to myself, miracles happen. And so I get up to the RV park and one of the things that had happened earlier, I woke up that morning and realized that the trailer jack had gotten bent. And I saw that and instead of panicking, I went, wonder how the universe is going to work this out. So I get to the RV park and I say, well, yeah, I'd like to use the internet. And also, is there anybody that could help me figure out what to do about this trailer jack? Because it doesn't feel like it's safe to use right now. And, oh yeah, well, not this guy, but that guy. And I'm like, cool. That guy comes over, fixes it right up. What I owe you? Oh, you don't owe me anything. Just helping you out. Just like somebody's helped me in the past. And I'm like, great, awesome, wonderful. I get online, I'm using their free internet and I look and again, they're telling me, "Oh, you're gonna have a hard time getting into that Hamilton pool." And I was like, "Okay, miracles happen, miracles happen." So I get on my phone and I look up this place and it says that not only do they have reservations available, they have them right now. And I'm less than 5 minutes away. And so I go and ask the maintenance man of the park, "Hey, can I leave my trailer here? Would that be all right?" And he's like, "I don't have a problem with it." I'm like, "Cool." Type in the reservation, hit the road, go see the pool. And I was like, all right. So with all of that in mind, I have very much come to understand that um, we we have this opportunity to surrender control, and at the same time, as we allow ourselves to feel whatever needs to be felt, and in that case, fear, doubt, whatever, without becoming that feeling and change the story, like you said, then the outcome can be completely different. And I've watched it happen at this point more times than I can count. And like I said, it doesn't mean you won't still have challenges, but instead of them being like, oh my God, this is the end of the world, it's like, okay, what higher good am I going to get from this experience? Something positive is going to come from it.
Yeah, I like to think of the challenges as redirections from the universe. You know what? It knows what's my best interest more than I do. So, like you being frustrated on that road because you can't go down and it's no trucks with trailers was for your best interest. Because had you continued to go down that road, and that's another thing is when we don't listen to our intuition, we're met with frustrations. And when we're being divinely guided, everything seems to flow and works out, and you, like you said, just miracles, things that you can't make up these stories, they just
Right,
happen to work
right.
out. So if you would have continued on that road, you probably would have got that hairpin turn. You're already bent. It would have, who knows, broke, something terrible would have happened. But because you listened, you were able to not only get it fixed for free, but still go enjoy what you wanted to do, but just a redirection. It was a
Right.
rerouting of your original plan in a way that worked out better than you had ever thought. And that's the one thing I've noticed when I learn to surrender and trust the universe, things work out better than I have planned out when I'm like, this makes absolutely zero sense. I have no idea why I'm doing this other than I'm being guided and led to do this thing. And then something magical happens. And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, well, I would have never in a million years thought of that because I'm
Yeah.
not an infinite being of wisdom, like my higher
You
version,
are
my
an
higher
infinite being.
power.
It's just we tell ourselves these limiting beliefs, right? Uh,
Yeah, when we're stuck in our brain and we think we know better, when
yeah,
you learn to let
exactly.
go, everything just seems to work out. So I love that story of just of trust and letting go.
Well, and that tie what you just said about just letting go and trusting ties very much in with the last thing I wanted to mention. So what I was saying is in relation to that, letting go and trusting is just being authentic, knowing that you don't have to put on a performance for anybody because a lot of times we do that out of fear. Well, there's always some kind of fear, but maybe fear of failure, fear of being judged, fear of, oh, if I don't act a certain way, then I might not get the money I need to survive, so fear of survival, fear of death. And this idea that we're supposed to be perfect, whatever that means, for infinite possibilities, and yet we have this idea that there's only certain ones that are acceptable. And so authenticity being another huge one of showing up in a way that fully supports who you are. You're unconditionally loving yourself. You're coming from that place of emotional liberation, like, okay, well, whether they approve of me or validate me doesn't matter because I'm going to do that for myself. And I'm going to be confident in who I am, even if anybody else has an opinion about it. And trusting that the universe will still supply for you. Like in my some of those stories that I shared was like, okay, do I feel completely equipped to drive this trailer across country? Not at all. Am I going to trust that this is the situation I'm stepping forward into and that I'm going to be supported in it somehow, even though I'm not suddenly this great carpenter or mechanic or anything? Yeah. And being willing to receive the help that was offered to me without feeling any kind of guilt over it. Like the man that helped me do all these repairs on my RV was just glad to do it. He was beside himself happy with, "Oh, yay, I have a project," and I'm like, "Knock yourself out, man." Um, so the last one I'll mention in relation to all of the evolution that I've had that helped me get through, the passing of my daughter, who helped me get through my cancer journey, helped me get through this recent traveling across the country, is boundaries both for yourself, which we've touched on quite a bit, but then also with other people, right? Like knowing that it's okay to say, I don't have the energy for that, or I'm not going to extend my energy to that situation, both within yourself and outside of yourself. Like, okay, can I spend a lot of time being upset that my jackpot broke? Yeah, I could. I could really work myself up about it. Like, it shouldn't have happened and turn it into a resentment, or I could say, well, this is what's happening and it has to be dealt with. And where are we going to go from here? So, like, having that self compassion really is what I'm getting at, both with the thoughts that you choose, with the lie that you tell yourself, as well as what you allow yourself to absorb from others. They're feeling whatever they're feeling, and you take that on as your own stuff to deal
Yeah.
with.
Yeah, I
And I'm
did
not saying a lack of compassion, but knowing where that line is.
yeah,
Yeah.
I did a whole master class last week on boundaries and how saying no isn't a bad word, and boundaries aren't about telling other people what they can and can't do. You can
Correct.
request that they do or do something, but boundaries is where you're actually protecting your relationship with that person, because when you let them overstep boundaries that they're not aware that you have, you're creating more resentment towards them. So
Yes.
when you create those boundaries, of course there's always going to be a little bit of resistance at first because it feels like rejection. We're always going to feel rejected when someone sets up a boundary. But if someone who loves and cares and appreciates you, they'll understand that it's coming from a place of love and appreciation and be able to understand and respect those boundaries. So it's about preserving your relationship and letting go of resentment and controlling what you can control, not, hey, I would like for you to not do that as a request, but if you do that, I'm going to do this is your boundary. So,
Right. Right.
and that's so important for protecting your peace. But yeah, like everything you've touched on is all in my dark feminine course. It's the boundaries, it's the authenticity, it's the surrender. I love it. So
Yeah.
yeah, you're in alignment
Awesome.
with
Yeah.
everything
Sounds
I
like it.
teach. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. I how all of this ties in for me with my podcast, I'll mention now, which is called You Are the Medicine, is helping people understand how much shifting your mindset and allowing yourself to feel whatever it is you need to feel without the story can literally alter your whole reality. And I've seen that happen both with the grief that I experienced with my daughter, and I shared that example. And then with my cancer journey, the part that I didn't share yet is about 2 years maybe after my diagnosis, and by end of year 1, it was gone. And one of the stories that I told myself was once the surgery was done, the rest of it's just extra. The cancer's gone. It's gone. And anybody that told me otherwise, I'm like, I mean, that's just not the case. And so a couple years afterwards, I watched this movie, a documentary on I think it's on a few streaming channels, but it's called Heal. And one of the things that really struck me in the video is this woman interviewed 1,500 people who had incurable diseases that were fatal, and they cured themselves of it. And it was documented evidence of it. And I mean, with all the Dr. Joe's done, there's so much evidence out there now. It's people who choose not to believe that are choosing not to believe that.
Mhm.
Um, but um, yeah, so I watched this video and she's talking about how she interviewed these 1,500 people to see what the common themes were. And that became the workshop series that you and I were both part of, the 9 things, because she shares these 9 things. And this is, mind you, 2 years past all of this happening for me. And she shares these 9 things, and I'm like, oh my God, I did all of that. And it was, like you said, that higher self, giving me that guidance, and very much about changing the story, the boundaries, both the self compassion, the authenticity, the letting go of the resentments, the surrendering to what is, and letting go of control and overcoming your fears and all of that. And I feel passionate about helping people to understand that the solution is within you. And yes, it may be some discomfort that you're going to have to feel. And you're going to become a new version of yourself if you decide that you're going to try to heal yourself in any kind of way, whether that's emotional or physical or whatever. You're going to become a new version of yourself. But the old version isn't working, or it wouldn't be sick. Having had a lot of experiences with alternative medicine and then traditional, what they call allopathic medicine, and recognizing all of it serves a purpose, and at the same time having a preference, and my preference very much being helping people to understand you don't have to keep looking to something outside of yourself as the way forward, because a lot of times those options just don't work. Chemo never cured anybody. Even the people who issue that medicine will tell you what it does is destroy your body, and then we try to keep you from dying from that, because it also destroys the cancer cells. um so the power of thought is just remarkable. I can't say that enough. And it's exciting to me to offer people a way forward with that, and to help pave the way for what some people call the new earth, as far as people seeing you are the medicine. The systems that we have are falling apart, and they're falling apart because they don't work well. We've outgrown them. We've evolved. We've gotten to a point of understanding who we really are. Remembering, as you said earlier, remembering your true vibration. And that true vibration doesn't sit well with some of the things that we're exposing it to right now. It's like, no, that doesn't work for me. So being part of opening the door for more people to experience that reality. And so I invite people to be a part of my podcast. If you have a powerful healing story, whether that be physical, mental, emotional, to share that story. That stories help heal or they help hurt, like what we've explored today. Like you can tell yourself a great story or you can tell yourself a terrible one. And for anybody that wants to go deeper, work personally with me, I do offer coaching to help work in those 5 areas. The biggest one being surrender. Because once you do that, then the other pieces start to fall in place.
Tell my listeners where can they find you on social media, websites.
So I've got a website. It's I'm forgetting, hang on one second. Make sure I get this right. thegraceadventure.com, which has dual meaning. Let's see if I can find you again. There you are. I'm also on Facebook. My Facebook name is Celeste Kimberly Evans, which is my maiden name. Are there any other places? I'm not really on any of the other social medias.
So
I
your
have Substack.
website and Facebook is probably the best way to reach out to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Facebook
And then
or
where is your what platforms is your podcast? Is it YouTube? Is it Spotify?
YouTube. Yep.
YouTube? Okay. Awesome. And I'll leave the actual links in the show notes so people can just go to them and click on them and find you there.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm trying to think, is there anything else I would like to share before we wrap up?
Is there anything else that I didn't ask you that we didn't cover that you wanna share with the world before we go?
If I could share in a nutshell very quickly, I would say there's nothing wrong with you. It boils down to unconditionally accepting yourself, including all the emotions that we've talked about and recognizing that you're not your thoughts. So your thoughts like to tell you there's all kinds of things wrong with you, and it's just not true.
Absolutely beautiful. Yeah, my life coach told me that last week. She said, you're not broken, you're whole, and you're expanding from that wholeness. You're not broken. Nothing's wrong with you. You're exactly where you should be and who you should be.
Yep.
And I think that's such a beautiful message to end on. So, Kimberly, it has been absolutely wonderful to have you. I'm so thankful that things worked out and you made it on the podcast today. So, thank you so much for being here. And let's go do life completely.
I love it.
Bye, guys.